childhood sweetheart turned out to be gay, so my engagement partner changed to his brother, Jack. Jack is tall and handsome, but with a serious and cunning personality. I have always been intimidated by him since I was a child and can hardly sleep properly. I heard he also has a crush, so I breathed a sigh of relief and encouraged him to bravely pursue love, always respecting him like a brother. Right? He smiled, loosened his tie, and calmly tied my hands behind my back. A dangerous vibe enveloped us. But this brother of mine may not be worth respecting. Before my brother barged into the nightclub, I was considering whether to accept the invitation from the male model in front of me to go to a hotel and admire his six-pack abs in the dark. The next moment, Eric rushed in angrily and dragged me out of the booth. The Maybach zoomed on the overpass, and I held onto the seatbelt tightly, terrified. Eric, what's wrong? Did our family go bankrupt? Your fiancé ran off with someone. Eric gripped the steering wheel, glanced at me coldly. With a moan gasped, he really turned gay, huh? So you've known all along. Such a big thing, and you didn't tell anyone in the family. What's the big deal? Engagements are just emotionless business deals. He loves men, I love to play. Isn't it a perfect match? I'm not going to waste my time talking to you. Eric grunted, then continued, just so you know, your engagement to Calvin is cancelled. I felt relieved. No more engagement then. Who said that? The Greens have more than one son. What does that mean? As you said, engagement is an emotionless business deal. So. He stepped on the gas, and I was thrown back against the seat by inertia. Our families will continue to work together. From now on, the person you are going to marry is Jack. The next morning, I hammered on Calvin's door loudly. Is everything okay? Calvin opened the door, looking bewildered with his messy hair. I grabbed his hand. Calvin, let's get married. Don't reject me. He quickly pulled away. Are you crazy? I collapsed on the sofa in the living room, feeling like all hope was lost. Calvin poured me a glass of water and sat beside me. Is everything set between you and my brother? I sighed sorrowfully. Last night, after being brought back home, my parents, with grim faces, announced that I would spend the rest of my life married to Jack, the eldest son of the Greens. Of course, the reason for their grim faces was because I had kept it a secret from everyone to protect Calvin. But when Jack was mentioned, their faces immediately lit up, breaking into laughter. That Judy is really lucky, to have a son-in-law like Jack. Your father and I couldn't have asked for more, my mother said. That's right, my father agreed. I know my brother is much better than me. Calvin nodded. Good-looking, fit, and smart. Many girls have their eyes on him, but you don't seem to cherish him. I jumped up from the sofa, grabbing his shoulders and shaking him. Calvin, don't you understand? No matter how good your brother is, I can't sleep with him. Calvin laughed. Can you sleep with me just fine? It's different for you. Officially married to each other, no one will interfere behind the scenes. I urged, but Jack has always been bossy and controlling towards me. If I marry him, all my happiness will be gone, don't you get it? Calvin was still smiling, but suddenly pushed me away, rushing to the bathroom to vomit violently. Are you feeling unwell? I asked cautiously as Calvin leaned against the wall, wiping his mouth. It's just a little stomachache, an old problem. I'll go to the hospital when I have time. And, you seem to have lost a lot of weight recently? Yeah, being gay can be quite stressful, you lose your appetite. He patted my shoulder and raised an eyebrow. My boyfriend is coming over, what about you? I better leave now. I walked to the door, putting on my shoes, and turned back to remind him, if you feel unwell, go to the hospital early for a checkup. Don't be lazy, you should know how to take care of yourself as an adult. Calvin sat quietly against the wall, laughing softly. The morning sunlight gradually became stronger, casting a golden glow on his lean figure through the huge French windows in the living room, making him look like an angel lost in the mundane world. He spoke. Got it. I was always a precocious child. Since kindergarten, I knew how to use toys to make boys follow me all the time. I showed off to Calvin and generously offered to let him jump the queue on the list, ahead of the bespectacled boy who often gave me chocolates because of the friendly relations between our families. Unexpectedly, Calvin rejected outright. "You don't want to marry this lady?" I asked, looking down at my beautiful princess dress and adjusting my shining plastic crown. It was hard to understand his decision. "Reasons?" "I don't like you," Calvin blinked his big eyes. "Why don't you like me?" "Reasons?" Calvin pouted. "You have a bad temper, you're loud, and you love to boss us boys around. Whoever marries you would be unlucky." Annoyed, I pushed him into the pool. "I'll make you unlucky right now." Calvin ran off, holding his wet pants. Soon, he brought in a crying child, pointing accusingly. "Bro, Judy bullied me." That year, Calvin's elementary school was in the same campus as our kindergarten. I thought Calvin had just gone to find the teachers, but he brought his big brother along. I saw Jack in person for the first time. Before starting elementary school, he followed his grandfather to live in the neighboring city and only returned to his parents when he was about to start school. It was said that his grandfather was a strict and stern old professor, with a list of achievements, such that even his son-in-law was meek and mild in front of him. The aura of authority, combined with Jack's first-grader demeanor, reminded me of teachers who would wield the ruler and discipline misbehaving students. Yes, it was Calvin who said I have a bad temper and am loud. I nervously twisted my skirt, not daring to look up. Is what he said true? It's somewhat true. You were mad because he exposed your shortcomings. Even if you're angry, it should be between the two of you to solve. Now, you've dirted his pants and inconvenienced others to clean up. Is that right? I was about to cry. No, that's not it. Then what should we do? I'm sorry. I burst into tears and I washed. In my first encounter with Jack, I was completely defeated, and in front of Calvin, I was completely overshadowed. The pants that I washed so clean, Calvin wanted to wear them every day. Until there was a hole worn in the backside, he finally regretfully threw them away. The two brothers had a 3-year age difference. That year, Eric was our family's eldest son who wandered in the north, and I was the only daughter, spoiled and willful. My parents all thought that Jack had a way of dealing with me, so they often sent me to his house, thinking it was particularly worry-free. Jack was naturally more mature than his peers, and he handled me and his little brother with great ease. Year in, year out, under Jack's influence, Calvin and I studied diligently, treating each end-of-term exam like a work report, summarizing our performance at school. My dad sighed at the time. Jack had the talent to be a leader from a young age. After finishing elementary school, Calvin and I entered middle school. On the first day of school, there was a photo of Jack on the honor roll, shining brighter than all the other students. With his youthful good looks, he outshone everyone else on the list. Several girls gathered in front of the list, pointing at his photo, whispering to each other. The senior class's schedule was different from the other grades. After a month of school, I hadn't seen many 9th graders on campus, but Jack's reputation had spread among the new students. Calvin was like a proud peacock, eager to tell everyone that the famous Jack was his brother. He even included me in the good news. "Do you know Judy? My brother treats her like a sister, even better than me." So, more and more girls would approach me frequently, bringing drinks and snacks, hoping to get Jack's contact information. I just wanted to acknowledge him as my brother. You wouldn't mind, would you? If I didn't give it to them, it would seem like I was being stingy. One night, I was awakened by the ringing of the phone at midnight. Hello? I was so sleepy that I could barely keep my eyes open as I picked up my phone and put it to my ear. "Do you like it?" The voice on the other end was cold, and I instantly became awake. "Jack? Do you like being bothered by midnight phone calls?" Jack's tone was irritated, telling me to give my number to those inexplicable people. I sat up, flustered and incoherent. They just said they wanted to acknowledge you as a brother. A brother? His mocking laughter sounded particularly harsh in the darkness. "Judy, isn't having you enough for me to deal with?" Just in the morning after leaving Calvin's place, his parents hosted an apology dinner at the club that evening. "Judy, what happened was a mistake on our part. My uncle and aunt didn't raise their son well. We didn't ask Calvin to come today, just to avoid making you feel uncomfortable. We will make sure to bring him over and apologize another day." My uncle and aunt raised their glasses, showing great humility. Uncle and aunt, actually I was about to speak, but Eric kicked my shoe under the table. This incident indeed caused quite a bit of damage to a young girl. The next one to speak was my dad. "That's right, we didn't expect our Judy to suffer such grievances in such an important matter of her life." My mom also sighed along, with a tearful look. "Which girl can bear it?" Their faces were solemn, and those who didn't know might have thought I had been deeply hurt by Jack. I took a sip of water from my glass, waiting silently for the continuation. Sure enough, Jack stood up at the right moment. "Uncle and aunt, our family is to blame for what happened." He walked up, handing a file folder to my parents. "This compensation agreement is our family's way of making amends to Judy, 2 sets of properties in London and Australia, to be held as premarital properties in Judy's name. There are other requests, feel free to make them, I will do my best. Also, I promise to take good care of Judy and never let her be hurt again." Jack's words were eloquent and tactful, the compensation proposal was sincere, and the elders' expressions instantly softened with that. Both sides were finally able to clink glasses. The rest of the dinner was filled with laughter. Everyone talked about everything from wedding plans to business, from economic situations to industry gossip. Chatting away about various topics, except for Calvin's name, everything else was fair game. Avoiding Calvin's persistence, he continued to message me. "Did you see the compensation agreement? Those 2 villas combined could be a small goal." I replied, "I blush with shame." "Take it if they give it to you, it shows how much they value marrying you." My finger hovered above the screen. Weighing the pros and cons is a businessperson's instinct, and marriage is an effective way to fend off external risks and ensure the long-term preservation of family wealth. For such an important collaboration, nearly ruined by a sexual orientation problem, whatever efforts they make to salvage it are justified as long as the cost they pay matches the value they place on me, and the value I represent in the eyes of my parents. These understandings are basic. Children from families like ours have been raised with this mindset since childhood. I turned off the screen, suddenly feeling bored. Judy. Coming back to my senses, I realized that Jack was standing next to me with a glass of wine. "Judy, let's propose a toast to our parents." Standing next to the calm and steady Jack, I drank the wine in my glass, to the satisfaction of my parents' approving gaze, then pushed back my chair. "I'm sorry, I need to take a phone call outside." Jack's club was located on the ground floor of the corporate park. The top floor of the building had a serene rooftop garden. With the families being intertwined for years, I had long had the authority to access every floor. Leaning against the railing, there were sparse lights in the industrial park below, a bright moon shining overhead, casting a light on the flowing clouds. I took out a pack of cigarettes that I had just tucked into my pocket, but when I reached in, I couldn't find a lighter. Strange, I should have had one, right? "Is this what you're looking for?" A familiar voice startled me, and as I turned around, Jack was standing not far away, tossing a small silver square towards me. I caught it, smiling at him, "Thanks." The flame lit up the cigarette, creating a dark red ember in the night. In such a rush, I almost didn't notice I had dropped my lighter. Jack approached, reaching into the pack of smokes to pull one out. "The brand hasn't changed, and the lighter is still the one I gave you years ago." He looked down, using the small flame in my hand to light his own cigarette. "Judy, you're quite sentimental." Sparks flickered, and 2 clouds of smoke dispersed and mingled in the air, with a faint minty smell wafting through it. Strange, but Jack is the only person around me who knows that I smoke when I'm feeling down. "Have you ever met Calvin's boyfriend?" he asked. I shook my head. How could Calvin bring him around? "You guys are so close, I thought he tells you everything. We've agreed a long time ago, marriage is marriage, emotions don't interfere." I bit my cigarette, glanced at Jack in the moonlight, and added, "Of course, this agreement applies to you too." "How generous of you." Jack crushed his cigarette on the rockery and casually asked, "Is it because you have feelings for someone else?" I was taken aback, couldn't help but smile. Of course, at this age, who hasn't had one or two names they can't mention in their hearts? How about you? I asked. Jack's gaze paused for a moment, then shifted elsewhere. I do. That's unexpected. Curiosity makes people bold. I stubbed out the cigarette and leaned in, asking, "Can I ask who she is?" In my heart, Jack seemed tailor-made for romance novels popular in school, but never heard of him having a serious relationship. Even though he followed his family's arrangements and went on blind dates with a few suitable girls, they all ended without success. It turns out the aloof CEO really does have unrequited love hidden in his heart. Life truly imitates art, but life is so ordinary. Do you really want to know? Yes, I do. He waved me closer, and unexpectedly bumped me on the head. Ouch. Why did you do that? You said you wouldn't tell. I protested loudly. You need a little fixing up, let me help, Jack said, stepping away and walking forward. Let's go back. The elevator doors closed, mirroring our side-by-side stance in a large frame. If we were wearing wedding dresses and suits, maybe we could pull off the look of a heavenly couple in other people's eyes. Do you want to change the wedding date? Jack suddenly asked, if you mind the wedding with Calvin was scheduled for the fall, half a year later. People have changed, so using the original plan might not be quite appropriate. Change it. I think we don't have to rush, what do you think? I'm flexible, you can decide. A mature marriage should be like this, with no extra expectations, so communication is very efficient. After some thought, I spoke again, about Calvin, has he been acting a little strange lately? Jack frowned, why isn't this elevator moving? The display is still stuck on the 11th floor, not going down. I thought your building got some fancy elevator, no sense of gravity and all. I said, reaching out to press the floor button again. Before my fingertips touched the panel, the lights suddenly disappeared, plunging us into darkness as we and Calvin plummeted rapidly. This is the feeling I hate the most. Like a drowning person desperately grabbing for a straw, like a fugitive who can never catch up with the disappearing escape route, wanting to breathe but being suffocated, wanting to cry for help but being choked. The darkness at that moment became tangible, with countless slippery tentacles reaching out in the viscous void, preventing us from sinking but also unable to escape. This is the feeling I fear the most. A voice calling my name echoed near and far. Judy, hang in there. I felt an embrace, pulling me back from the brink of anxiety, grasping it tighter as if afraid it would slip away. Jack's voice was close to my ear. Judy, don't be afraid. I'm here. I knew I had intermittent claustrophobia since I was 17, one summer in New York. During the final week of summer school, Jack and I planned to go to Chinatown for dinner to soothe our homesick Chinese stomachs. However, the apartment elevator suddenly dropped and lost power while descending. Trapped inside were not only me and Calvin but also Jack, who was studying in New York at the time, and two others. The elevator was old-fashioned, and the small space quickly became unbearably hot. At first, I didn't panic too much. There was still a signal in the elevator. One person called for help with their phone, and we chatted casually for a while. But gradually, that sense of panic caught up to me. Until the repairman opened the elevator door from outside, and I was lifted up like a pile of mud onto the corridor. Someone asked if an ambulance was needed. Jack supported my waist, held my head, and asked worriedly, "Can you stand? Should I carry you for a bit to try?" I couldn't speak, so I nodded. In my memory, that evening was pink. The twilight tinted the entire city, and even the air was infused with the romantic glow of the sky. I lay on Jack's back, holding onto his neck, smelling the familiar laundry detergent scent on his clothes, a faint cool mint flavor, feeling my soul finally returning, yet also stirred up by an indescribable wave. Calvin raced down a grassy slope, wildly taking photos of the brilliantly lit Manhattan Island across the river, while Jack and I sat waiting for him. Jack, was I really scary just now? I took out a tissue from my bag and handed it to him cautiously. He took it, wiped the sweat off his forehead, and simply said, "I'm fine." As the night deepened, the wind cooled down. I looked at Jack again, and he still had a faint blush on his already fair face, like two small lingering evening glows. That night, we never made it to Chinatown but bought burgers, fried chicken, and popcorn, and watched an outdoor movie in the city center. Among the towering skyscrapers, the park felt like a tiny canyon. The place was crowded, resembling an unplanned large gathering. The grass was soft and solid, with a gentle breeze blowing, as if an invisible hand occasionally tickled the hearts of the people as we watched the movie. Calvin suddenly turned around, grinning. "Judy, you always try to avoid my brother when we're having fun, but when something happens, you hug my brother tighter than anyone else." I ignored him, but Jack reached out a hand and quietly turned his head back. I no longer remember what movie was showing, only the lights of the city rising amid the sunset, like a brilliant galaxy ascending in the night sky. Every now and then, I would lower my head and see our shadows overlapping on the ground. Many years later, whenever I passed by a similar park, I would replay that brilliant summer night in my mind like the longest movie of my life. Do you think it's the bridge effect both times? Susan pushed a glass of wine she had just mixed from behind the bar, resting her chin on her hands and staring at me. Isn't love just a result of dopamine secretion? Who cares where that dopamine comes from? I took a sip of the wine and almost spit it out. What is this, so bitter? She delicately hooked the plaque on the table with her slender fingers, which read, "Love Antidote." Really someone buying into this? It's a bestseller. Susan and I had been friends since middle school, and now she owned a bar in the alleyways of the old town. Back then, she was one of those girls who had a crush on Jack. After receiving Jack's midnight warning, many girls immediately became distant, but Susan stayed, and our friendship lasted until today. She was the only one who knew about my vague crush on Jack. The drink was too awful, so I took out my cigarette pack, only to be smacked on the hand by Susan. "How many times have I told you no smoking at the bar? Go smoke in the corner." She sighed. "Fine, just get me another drink." I pushed the glass, pouting, "Give me a sweet love, please." She pushed the glass back, saying, "No change, this is the taste of your love. Bitterness wakes you up, sweetness makes you dizzy." She tossed the used mixing spoon into the sink and started speaking like a philosopher. "Judy, I have never met anyone as awkward as you. Is Jack your senior? Admitting you like him feels like a betrayal? You hang out in nightclubs every day, pretending to be a playgirl, but in reality, you just timidly hold hands with those guys, staring at abs, way too scared." I couldn't take it anymore. The woman had a sharp tongue. I raised my glass, emptied it in one gulp, and the bitter liquid tortured my taste buds. Satisfied, Susan took the empty glass away, smiling, "Congratulations in advance on the wedding." Then she dashed off to attend to other customers. I stayed in my spot, waiting for the bitterness to fade, and my taste buds finally detected a hint of sweetness. Behind the bar, there were all kinds of liquors lined up, shining like liquid gems under the spotlight. Remembering the mixing technique Susan had taught me, I chose a sweet wine and continued sipping on it. A girl was leaning against the bar, sobbing, speaking into her phone, "He hasn't contacted me for so long, he must not care about me." The crying voices seemed to pierce my heart, subtly reminding me of the trapped elevator incident that happened exactly a week ago. Jack had called that night to ask about the situation, but there had been no messages since then. In this day and age, a week of silence meant being swiftly forgotten in the other person's chat list. Judging by his attitude, he didn't even want to pull me out of that list. I slammed my phone on the table, grabbed the wine glass, and chugged it down in one go, only to start coughing the next moment. I had underestimated Susan's drinks, they were a knockout. "What did you drink?" Susan heard the commotion and rushed over. My throat was burned, and I couldn't speak, so I just pointed to the bottles I had touched earlier. Susan picked up two of them, looking puzzled. "You mixed these two together and drank it?" I defended myself in a hoarse voice, "But wasn't it? You didn't show me which one to pick." "Well, forget it." She put down the bottles and looked at me seriously. "Do you feel lightheaded?" "Not really." I stood up straight, but asked, "But why did you move so fast? You have two heads now." In my vision, two-headed Susan lifted my chin, smiling gently with her bright red lips moving from left to right. "Judy, it's time to sleep." I closed my eyes and fell backward. I was awakened by a cat's tail flicking on my face. "Scarlett, don't sit on my face." The kitten jumped off the bed, tail high, and meowed arrogantly. I threw off the covers, still in yesterday's clothes. There was a glass of lemon water on the bedside table, indicating that Susan had brought me back again. I washed off the smell of alcohol, changed into comfortable pajamas, picked up Scarlett, and ran out of the room feeling refreshed. "Susan. Why didn't you change my clothes for me last night?" Susan's silhouette was absent from the living room, but there was a strange suitcase by the front door. The kitchen door swung open, revealing Jack holding 2 breakfast plates, walking out confidently. "Morning, sit down and eat." I froze in place, arms weakened. Scarlett ran off. "Jack, why did you bring me back last night?" I played innocent, cupping the milk glass in my hands. "Your friend who owns the bar called me." Jack balanced a sandwich in one hand and checked emails on his laptop with the other. "She said she had my number from when she traded 2 cups of tea for it while you were in school. Let's not bring up stuff from a long time ago." I awkwardly lowered my head, wishing I could bury my face in the milk. Having breakfast was excruciating, sitting opposite Jack in my pajamas for the first time, feeling so nervous not knowing where to put my hands and feet. "Let's just leave it there." Jack peeked at me between handling his work. "I'll tidy up during a break. Empty your plate." Catching my eye, he asked me seriously, "Are you going to keep being so polite with me from now on?" I froze for several seconds, then shook my head. "We're going to live together sooner or later, so some changes need to be made. I hope you can adapt in advance." After that, Jack calmly withdrew his gaze, focusing back on his work. The room fell silent, only the sound of his typing on the keyboard could be heard. I held my breath, carefully put down my fork, tiptoed to pull out the chair, and slipped back into the room. When I closed the bedroom door, I finally dared to lean against the wall and gasp for air. The pressure from Jack was too strong, his innate dominance was irresistible, only a crazy person like me would be attracted to him. Damn proximity effect. Susan's phone took 3 tries to pick up. "It's still early now." She was very sleepy. As a bar landlady, she usually doesn't wake up until noon. "You talk about Jack." Susan yawned. "He's not a bad person. Heard he just came back from a business trip last night. Didn't even touch the door at home after getting off the plane. Turned around and rushed over to pick you up." She also asked me, "What does Judy usually like to drink as a hangover cure?" Really thoughtful, making people jealous. The lemon water from last night, was it sickeningly sweet? Are you two really just in a marriage relationship? "I'm tired, let's talk later." The call was hung up so hastily, and from the sounds of it, she expected me to thank her. Changed into normal clothes, I pushed open the door again, and Jack was already washing the dishes there. I originally thought about reminding him that we could leave it to the housekeeper, but decided to keep my mouth shut. "Jack, you must be tired from the business trip, right?" I stood beside him, making small talk. "And last night, did you sleep on the sofa?" "Where else?" He glanced at me. "The other 2 empty rooms don't seem fit for sleeping." That's right, the other 2 guest rooms had long been turned into storage rooms with piles of unused clothes and bags. I awkwardly rubbed my neck. "After we get married, just don't make me sleep on the sofa." "Fine." The air fell silent again, and I stood there like a punished child, wondering when he would leave and why the few dishes hadn't been washed yet. "Once the driver arrives, I'll leave." It's like he can read minds. In such a rush, I tried to hide my relaxed smile, and I was actually planning to treat you to lunch to say thank you. "Sure, we can leave together later." He chuckled. Scarlett was scratching on the sofa, and Jack picked her up. "What's wrong with this cat?" Probably trying to hide something in the cracks of the sofa again. I said, "She always likes to stuff things in there when she's bored, like tissues, socks, and more." Suddenly, a terrible thought crossed my mind. These past few days, I couldn't find a pair of red lace panties. Could it be? Before I could act, Jack's hand had already reached into the cushion, and he found something. Pulling it out, I lunged forward. Don't. But it was too late. Between Jack's slender fingers, there was a dark red, delicate, lacy fabric, a dark red lace headband. I slipped and fell heavily on the ground. Pretty bad sprain, go take some x-rays to see if the bone was affected, the doctor said, looking at my severely swollen ankle. Judy, I'll take you for the x-rays. The nurse from the private hospital was attentive. As soon as the doctor instructed, she immediately came over to push my wheelchair. Jack followed along, occasionally suppressing a smile. An hour ago, due to a misunderstanding where Jack found an inexplicable item in the sofa crack, I tried to save it but ended up accidentally stepping on the cat's toy ball, spraining my foot. Jack's driver was supposed to take him back, but ended up driving us both to the hospital. No one spoke along the way. My face turned pale. Jack kept holding back his laughter, and the driver glanced at us through the rearview mirror, completely puzzled. Fortunately, the x-rays showed no bone damage. The doctor wrote a prescription, and Jack pushed me to the VIP lounge to wait for the nurse to bring the medication. I coughed lightly, pointing to the gas-upon machine in the corner. Jack, can you go to the front desk and get some coins for me? I want to try it out. Am I bothering you by being here? Jack brutally interrupted. Come on, I'm the injured one here. He sighed, finally stood up and walked away. I fished out a round coin from my pocket, glanced in the direction he left, and then wheeled myself to the gas-upon machine. With the coin in the slot, the metal knob turned, and the long-awaited sound of childhood rang out once again. As the capsules fell, I bent over to reach for the blocker at the opening, but someone else's hand was quicker and grabbed it before May looked up to see a young male doctor in a white coat, crouching by the machine, smiling as he handed me the gas-upon. Thank you. I took it, recognizing the face as familiar. Have you forgotten me so soon? The young doctor looked at me, surprisingly. I was taken aback, took a closer look, and finally remembered. Isn't this the male model who showed me his abs that day? Just remembering that, looks like you've completely forgotten about me. The doctor looked disappointed. Judy, I even gave you the candy I cherished so much as a child. With that reminder, I finally noticed some familiarity in the handsome face in front of me. Glasses. It's really you. It's not easy, the adult version of Glasses smiled, and there was no trace of the skinny monkey boy from the past in his gestures. How did you injure your foot? Alone. Do you need me to drive you back later? No need. A clear, cold voice sounded behind me, sending a chill down my spine. Glasses averted his gaze, slowly stood up. Who's this? He is me. Just thinking about my complicated relationship with Jack at the moment made my tongue feel tied. My brother. Jack looked at me expressionless. So he's the brother, huh? Glasses extended his hand warmly. Hello, nice to meet you, I'm Judy's kindergarten classmate. Jack glanced at his name tag on the chest for a second, then extended his hand, with an emotionless tone. Nice to meet you, Dr. Hendry. On the way back from the hospital, Jack seemed to be in a bad mood. I tried to start a conversation a few times, but as soon as I met his stony face, I obediently stayed silent. The atmosphere in the car was tense, but my phone was buzzing with messages, one after the other from Hendry. Judy, let me know before your next checkup, I'll schedule it for you. Where do you live? Let's hang out together when you're free. What do you usually like to do? I'm up for anything. I put away my phone and opened the gas-upon I just got. Was this bought by your kindergarten classmate? Jack suddenly spoke up, with a hint of sarcasm in his tone. Admitting that I actually brought coins seemed like a bad idea at this point. Thankfully, he didn't inquire further, just turned his head and ignored me. After safely dropping me off at home, this time, Jack picked up the luggage at the door and left decisively. This week, he had been shuttling between 3 cities on a business trip, meeting with over a dozen supply chain manufacturers and clients. After landing the plane last night, exhausted like a dog, yet upon a call from the bar owner, he rushed to find Judy without a second thought. Taking care of her all night, pouring water, patting her back, Jack could only manage to spend the night on the sofa without even a blanket. As he opened his eyes in the morning, there was a chubby cat squatting on his face. The more Jack thought about it, the angrier he got. He showed it so clearly, but Judy either didn't understand or pretended not to, actually telling a stranger that he was her brother? Was he only worthy of being a brother? Mr. Jack. The driver observed from the rearview mirror, your complexion doesn't look too good. Are you feeling unwell? Do you want to go to the hospital again? Jack waved his hand, then remembered something and took out a few coins from his pocket, placing them on the dashboard in front. Does your daughter like playing with capsule machines? Take these, it's hard to change coins outside now. The driver didn't understand. Thank you, but my daughter is already in middle school, she doesn't play with these anymore. Jack sneered, well, who's so childish like her, still playing with kindergarten classmates? As he closed his eyes, Judy's figure became more and more vivid. She was always a bit restrained in front of him, occasionally lively and uninhibited, like a flash in the pan, but it was not the same with others. For instance, with his younger brother Calvin, they used to play and bicker since they were kids, but they got along well, so much so that when it came time for marriage, everyone thought the union was a perfect match. With the young intern doctor from earlier, just forget about that person. Jack opened his eyes with a furrowed brow and let out a deep sigh. When he felt irritable, he was used to smoking a cigarette. But when his hand reached into his pocket, he pulled out a long hairband instead. A dark red, light, soft, lacy hairband. As they waited at a red light, the driver inadvertently glanced in the rearview mirror again and found that his boss's complexion had improved a lot. With his left hand inexplicably wrapped in a red ribbon, a bright and charming color that looked undeniably like a woman's personal item, the driver was certain that his boss was in love. As the green light lit up, the car started slowly. When making a turn, for a moment, the sunlight pierced through the uneven branches, shining into the back seat of the car, dividing the area into light and dark. The red hairband floated in the light, alluring and dazzling. The cool man sat upright in the shade, staring intently at the item in his hand. Jack left with a stern face. I couldn't understand what I had done to upset him. Half an hour later, he sent me a message. Change the way you address me, don't call me brother anymore. What's that supposed to mean? The message was ignored. Later in the evening, news of my sprained ankle reached my parents' ears. Nearly at dusk, Eric, under the orders of my parents, relocated me and the cat back to the old house. Mother brought a bowl. If I hadn't responded promptly, she would have fed me the soup directly. My foot is swollen, not broken. This diet doesn't make sense. Don't talk nonsense if you don't understand. There must be a reason for this diet. Judy, why did Jack come to be with you so early in the morning? My father's eyes lit up. Have you been getting along well recently? You're kidding, I can only see his mood in the early morning. I nibbled on Pig's feet, feeling wronged. Is he bullying you? Eric put down his chopsticks. He wouldn't do that, Jack is a very upright guy. Mother stepped in to defend. Could it be that he found out about his brother's situation and got upset? Speaking of this Calvin, I didn't expect him to be so outrageous. When she mentioned Calvin's name, I looked up. What happened with Calvin? He sold all the houses and cars that his parents gave him without their knowledge, then went abroad without saying a word. It was your uncle who used connections to find out that he flew to the Netherlands the day before yesterday. The Netherlands? Is he going to get married to his boyfriend? I marveled internally. But really, I have no idea what spell that guy has cast on him. I really don't understand how men can be together. Your uncle is furious. All right, don't mention him. Father waved his hand, as if shooing away a fly. Judy, listen to your dad, feelings are developed through interactions. You've known Jack for so many years, knowing each other inside out, you'll get along eventually. Look at your brother, when he got married to your sister-in-law at first, he was reluctant. Now, over half a year has passed, and they are as good as any couple. Eric, who is usually reserved, blushed, cleared his throat, and quietly put another piece of Pig's feet in my bowl. Exactly. Mother chimed in, both of our children are so lucky, come on, divide the meat between yourselves. Back in the room, I quickly dialed Calvin's number and found that it was turned off. I opened a social app and saw that he had deactivated his Instagram account. I left him a message asking about the situation, then took a deep breath and opened the chat box with Jack. I heard about Calvin, since he had planned it early. He must have made adequate preparations, don't worry too much. I waited and waited for a response, and finally heard the new message notification sound. After typing so many words, he just replied with yes. This wasn't about working things out, this was rubbing my face on the ground. I decisively typed 2 words in the input box, break up, and then quickly deleted it. Some things are just for the thrill. Just as I thought about it, Jack's name suddenly appeared along with a ringtone, jumping on the screen. I cautiously picked up the call. Did you really just find out about Calvin's situation? The voice on the other end remained the same, low and magnetic, with no discernible emotion. Of course, I'm not into intelligence work. Jack chuckled, I thought he told you everything. Now that you know, there's not as much shared between him and me as you might think. I was a bit angry. I'm sorry, that was impulsive. I heard the sound of a lighter spinning on the other end, knowing that he was in a bad mood. He really caused a big mess this time. Jack said, he's not stupid, it's lucky that he left the country. If he was still in China, there would have been ways to bring him back. How are Uncle and Auntie? I asked. They broke all the antiques downstairs, now the family doctor is checking their blood pressure. I sighed, brother, persuade them. What did you call me? I covered my mouth. Call me again. That one. I bit my finger nervously, hesitated for a moment before saying, Jack, nothing else, I'll hang up first. Standing alone on the curved balcony on the 2nd floor, Jack looked down at the expansive garden, sparks flickering at his fingertips as his thoughts began to drift and wander. The past memories were like smoke in front of his eyes. Judy's family is a bit special, the siblings have different mothers. Eric lived up north with his biological mother until he was 15. He still remembers the year Judy arrived in the city. Several adults surrounded Judy and asked her to call him brother. Judy obediently complied, but when she said the word brother, her eyes involuntarily glanced at herself. Jack had to admit that, at that moment, he felt a surge of satisfaction. He has always played the role of an older brother, being more responsible in many aspects than Judy, who often acted bossy and even dared to fight with boys when she was little. But in front of him, she was as obedient as a lamb, quietly reading and writing. Jack found this differential treatment very satisfying. However, he gradually began to feel that something was not right. Judy respected him, but also feared him. There seemed to be a safety distance between them, and once it was crossed, she refused to step any closer to him. He started to reflect on what went wrong early on, but at that time, he did not realize that this self-examination already contained some intentions to get closer. This safety distance between them had once shortened. He accidentally saw 19-year-old Judy smoking, her face turning pale with fear, and he stood there stunned. After a few seconds, he walked up to her, took the cigarette box she was trying to hide behind her back, and, to her surprise, put the cigarette back in her hand. After a few steps, he turned back, took out a new limited edition lighter from his pocket, and placed it in her hand. It's for you, he said. Jack's addiction to smoking began from that moment, not because he was so dependent on nicotine, but because he knew Judy's secret. A secret only shared with him. Jack, your parents are basically stable now, the family doctor said respectfully to his tall and slender figure on the balcony. Jack thanked him and personally escorted the doctor downstairs. After taking his blood pressure and sleeping pills after his parents had gone to bed, Jack gently closed the door to their room. Then, in his own room, he turned on his computer and opened an email he had just received. The email contained several screenshots taken from surveillance cameras, Calvin and another young man he had never seen before. Since the surveillance only refreshed the content weekly, there were few moments to capture, and these were the clearest shots taken. Jack forwarded the email to another address, then dialed a number on his phone. After less than 3 rings, the call was answered. Check into this man's background, Jack said coldly. Perhaps due to being well taken care of at home, by the time I went for my hospital checkup, my foot was almost back to normal. The examination went well, and the doctor praised my amazing recovery. Hendry was waiting for me outside the clinic. As I pushed the door open, he was fully focused on watching a local news bulletin playing on the corridor television. Calvin from Green's group has been revealed to have sold off family assets and eloped overseas with a mysterious boyfriend. As a result, the stock price has fluctuated today, dropping by 6.8%. On the screen appeared Jack, with his cold face, black suit, and surrounded by a group of bodyguards, walking straight through the media cameras. It was reported that Vice President Jack made an appearance today but did not respond to the related situation. Henry noticed me and snapped out of his trance. "Judy, your brother?" Sitting on a bench in the hospital lawn, I explained everything to Henry. "Oh, I see," Henry suddenly understood. No wonder he looked at me that day with guarded eyes. "Have you made a mistake?" "No mistake, it's just a man's intuition," I scratched my ear. "Anyway, sorry for lying to you, it's not intentional." "But, you've lied to me about more than just this one thing," he pointed out seriously, lifting an eyebrow. "It was a joke." Henry waved his hand, returning to his playful demeanor. "Tell your fiancée not to worry, I'm not the type to meddle in other people's relationships." I smiled casually, thinking he was indeed not to be trusted. "Well, I won't keep you from work. Let's catch up when we have time. Bye." Only when Judy's figure was no longer visible did Henry's smile fade. He sat on the bench, still as a beautifully sculpted statue, feeling deflated. Feeling empty inside, he blamed the passing dark cloud for taking away all the sunshine. Comforting himself in this way, Henry then heard his senior calling his name loudly from the front hall. "Henry. What are you daydreaming about? The supervisor called you to do rounds." Henry almost instantly sprang back to life, propped himself up, and elegantly leaped over the bench, shocking passing medical staff and patients with his fluid movements. He chanted for them to come along and rushed forward like a gust of wind. "Dad, has the media gone crazy? Green's Group is a major local company, and they're reporting negative news so shamelessly." As soon as I got home, I headed straight to the tea room to find the old man. Anyone who can stand steady here must have some connections behind them. My father paused from brewing tea. As my restlessness was calmed down, he continued. "In the 2 years that Jack has gradually taken over the group's affairs, he has expanded aggressively, like a force of nature, shaking up many nests. Only now has someone dared to show their hand, and that's quite a daring move. Deception in the business world is common. Ultimately, it's all about grabbing a share. The more you eat, the less others have. Competition starts this way. So, the bigger our business becomes, the more we need to seek collaboration, making the right partners part of our interests. The tighter the binding, the stronger the resistance to risks. Judy, you understand your father's meaning, right?" I nodded silently. "You are mature, unlike some spoiled children in our circle, always talking about pursuing love, breaking free, only to start wondering what has supported their luxurious lives for the first 20-something years after the passion fades. Marriage, ideally, grows affection. But even if love can't be cultivated, loyalty must be formed. You and Jack are not only husband and wife in the future, but also comrades in arms. This way, you can remain invulnerable in the face of challenges in the future." "Dad, I understand." The old man nodded approvingly. "There's an industry exchange event next week. Accompany your fiancée there." Jack appeared thinner than he did the last time we met, his jawline so sharp it was enviable. He helped me put the luggage in the overhead bin with one hand until the last second before the plane was ready to taxi, and finally put down the phone with the other hand. Ever since Calvin disappeared, all the business responsibilities at the company had fallen on his brother's shoulders. "Is your foot okay?" That was the first thing he said to me after we met today. "I'll take a nap." That was the second thing he said. 3.5 hours later, the plane landed smoothly at the airport. Jack woke up groggily, leaning against the seat back, managing to doze off for a while. I leaned close to his ear, whispering, "You fell asleep," and even flirted with the flight attendant. He furrowed his brow, looking puzzled. Just now, the flight attendant told the gentleman in the front row that the wine he ordered wasn't available on this flight. Do you know what you replied? I leaned back in my seat, closed my eyes, and imitated the way Jack talked in his sleep. Temporary change. Is there a legal basis in the contract? Call legal over. Jack chuckled, his eyes sharp again. He unfastened his seatbelt, got up, and retrieved his luggage. Shouldn't have fallen asleep. Could have saved some energy to get the flight attendant's number or something. I rolled my eyes lightly and followed him off the plane. Industry networking events were mostly for expanding connections and acquiring resources. Jack was only there to fulfill social obligations, and the afternoon was packed with endless business matters. He was often nowhere to be found, leaving a line of vendors wanting to exchange contact information queued in front of his seat. So they looked towards me in the adjacent seat. I pretended to answer a call and slipped out of the venue under the gazes of those seeking introductions. Looking out from the hotel, the city was a mix of tall buildings and rolling hills, a unique landscape. Excuse me, are you also a guest at the networking event today? A young man with thin-framed glasses and a silver-gray suit stood next to me. Hello. I nodded politely to the man. I'm David from Knowledge Source Tech. May I know which company the lady represents? The man had a charming demeanor, so I introduced myself. My responsibilities at the company actually have little to do with today's theme. My father had something urgent, so he sent me as a stand-in. David smiled and commented, "Your father must really trust Miss Judy's capabilities to have you represent him." Since we knew each other, it wasn't easy to refuse when he asked if I could share my contact details. David. Along with the sound of high heels approaching, a beautiful girl in a pink suit hurried over. Why are you here? They've been looking for you everywhere. You'll be up next for a speech. The girl was radiant and spoke with a slightly bold, smoky voice. She was wearing 12 centimeters heels and naturally linked arms with David. She looked at me with her big contact lens-enhanced eyes. Who's this? Miss Judy, a guest at today's event as well. David put away his phone, unperturbed, and added, Helen, the event organizer's sister. After exchanging pleasantries, Helen, still enthusiastic, said it was almost time and tugged David towards the event venue. I stayed behind, took a photo of the view outside, intending to send it to Susan. Another message came in, David. I glanced across the hall and saw Helen in her eye-catching outfit, still holding on to David's arm. She opened the hall door for him with a smile, and for a moment, David's gaze passed beyond Helen and met mine. I wasn't wrong, Jack's trip here was indeed for something important. Later, I had to visit someone, and if you didn't want to eat the buffet provided by the host, the restaurant on the 6th floor of this hotel is also good. I recommend trying it. Jack came out of his room, ditching the extra suit jacket and now wearing a light blue shirt with dress pants, sleeves rolled up to his elbows, looking neat yet casual. It seemed he had a close relationship with the person he was meeting tonight. I also have plans. Helen invited me to dinner. I informed Jack. He nodded. Good, it never hurts to make more connections. As the banquet was wrapping up, I was about to leave when Helen grabbed my arm. Why are you in such a hurry, Judy? I wondered, is there a second venue? She smiled and dragged me into the car, smelling of alcohol and perfume. You came all the way from your hometown, must experience our nightlife, it's a shame otherwise. Without waiting for my response, she pushed me into the car. The entertainment industry was thriving here, and I knew that. But where Helen took me far exceeded my expectations. Although back home, I considered myself a nightlife princess, tonight's scene made me realize how pure and conservative I actually was. Cheers. A delicate-looking boy approached me, pouring a shot of liquor down his throat and purposely let some of it trickle down his chin. Seeing I was unfazed, he poured another shot and tried to hand it to me. Why not feed me, sister? I quickly sidestepped and said, No, find someone else to drink with. At the club called Ace Club, Helen had booked a huge VIP room with karaoke, a pool table, a private bar, and male hosts dressed in revealing clothing all over the room. 3 male hosts jumped on the bar counter with cheers and started dancing to the music. It was an indescribable dance. I felt trapped and unable to leave because the host Helen was just too enthusiastic. I had to text Jack for help. Are you done with your business? Get me out of this place. Jack responded promptly, on my way, Just give me the address and room number. I quickly forwarded the details. Why don't you go have fun with the handsome guys? Helen perched beside me with a drink. Don't you like anyone? I'll have them switch out another batch for you. I held her hand back hastily and smiled. No need, I'm more of a looker than a toucher. Just watching is fine. Helen laughed loudly, and her entourage joined in the laughter. Feeling a bit overwhelmed, my fingertips on the phone tightened unintentionally. I hadn't realized the volume button was accidentally turned up to the maximum. When a new message came in, the phone rang loudly and abruptly. Helen swiftly snatched my phone. I was curious to see which suitor had Judy so excited tonight. She eagerly opened the message, but her smile quickly faded. I had a sinking feeling that I knew who the message was from. Miss Judy, nice to meet you. Has anyone ever told you that you look like a celebrity? I'm planning to visit Jiangxing in the next half year. Would it be possible to be received by Miss Judy? Helen mockingly read every message David sent today aloud. With each sentence she spoke, the noise in the private room diminished. By the time she finished reading the last message, the silence was palpable. If Miss Judy doesn't reply to my messages, I'll be sad, I thought to myself as I nervously sat there with sweaty palms. Alright, no wonder you didn't like any of the men you invited. Turns out you've got your eyes on my man, Helen said before dunking my phone into an ice bucket. Someone, go to room number 6, invite my brother and his friends over, I said sternly. Miss Helen, if you read every message clearly just now, you should know I have no interest in your David. Thank you for your hospitality, I'll be leaving now. I stood up, trying to appear calm, tightly gripping a glass of wine which could serve as a weapon if necessary. As I neared the door, however, 5 or 6 people pushed their way in, all with unfriendly expressions. The leader, whom I had seen at an event earlier that day, was Sam, Helen's brother and the organizer of the event. The situation looked grim. The others in the room dispersed, leaving only the siblings, their entourages, and myself. Judy, you can flirt with anyone, just not David, Sam said with a breath smelling of alcohol and cigarettes. He's going to be my brother-in-law soon, understand? Flirt with him? He's the one harassing me. I retorted, feeling my temper rise. Sam glared and was about to step forward, but was held back by one of his lackeys. Sam, this woman came with Jack from the Greens group. Shouldn't we think twice? The lackey said, only to be kicked by Sam. Here, we're the bosses. No matter how powerful Jack is, he won't cause trouble on my turf, got it? As he continued to rant, he seemed to remember something, a look of disdain crossing his face. Oh, and by the way, what about that scandal with Jack's little brother recently? It caused quite a stir, right? If he can't even handle that, it shows that kid isn't that capable after all. With his head held high, he pointed at me, saying, listen, either kneel down and apologize to my sister right now, promising to never contact David again. Or today, you won't leave here on your 2 feet. Helen's lackey brought her a chair as she propped her legs up, looking smug. She nodded towards her feet, signaling for me to come over. With the situation at hand, she was convinced I would compromise. It seemed like she had employed such tactics more than once. Fine, I'll kneel, I whispered to myself, took a deep breath, then, gripping the wine glass tightly, I aimed it outward. The glass was fragile, shattering as it hit Sam's head. I held the handle like a dagger in front of me, the broken glass still sharp on the edges. Sam's expression changed from confusion to disbelief, then to pure rage. Suddenly, a scream erupted from behind him. At the same time, someone grabbed my wrist and pulled me back just in time to avoid the impending harm. Almost simultaneously, a loud thud was heard, the sound of a heavy kick landing on a body. The impact was too strong, sending Sam flying several meters backward, his back hitting a cabinet causing multiple bottles of alcohol to shatter on the floor. Before I could process the situation, I heard a voice yelling in my ear, run. He pulled me out of the private room, dashing towards the exit like an arrow released from a bow. It was then that I realized, under the adrenaline rush, even in high heels, one could run as if in a sprint competition. Another wave of people poured out of the Ace Club, more than before, menacingly shouting not to let us escape. Jack! Think of something. Though I hadn't had the chance to clearly see the person who rescued me, when he grabbed my wrist, my instinct already knew it was Jack. Be it in the out-of-control elevator or the dangerous private room, Jack would find a way to protect me. This way. Jack pulled me into an alley. Behind us, the sounds of shouting and pursuit continued relentlessly. My strength was nearly spent, and my lungs felt ready to burst. Suddenly, in front of us, another group of people blocked the way. The dim light from the street lamp illuminated their large gold chains and tattooed arms, holding club-like weapons. They were the perfect antagonists in this scene. My head spun, and with the last of my breath, I screamed, "Jack! You're going the wrong way, idiot! They're on our side." As the words left my mouth, the menacing group parted, clearing a path. Jack and I ran towards this protective circle as if crossing a finish line. The nightclub thugs halted their advance 10 meters away, whispering among themselves, seemingly recognizing the group that shielded us. A bald man approached us politely, asking, "Are you injured?" Jack, still catching his breath, lifted my right hand to show the man. There were traces of blood from glass shards piercing my thumb and index finger. The bald man walked to the front of the group and shouted, "Mr. William said, if any guest is even slightly injured, Helen and Sam are to be taken to the hospital." The group received the order and menacingly approached, bent over, breathless. The chaos and battle sounds in the alley seemed both distant and near. As I tried to catch my breath, a hand covered my eyes. "Don't look. Don't turn around." Jack took my hand, leading me away from the commotion. "Who's Mr. William?" I asked. "One of my grandfather's students. He used to be poor, and my grandfather supported him until he finished college. When my grandfather passed away, he came to pay his respects. You came here to find him. Since you're already causing trouble, what's a little more?" Jack replied. Meanwhile, the bustling noise of the street grew closer. I couldn't help but look back and saw that the tattooed guys had finished cleaning up the scene and were heading towards the nightclub. "Should we leave tonight?" I tugged at Jack's sleeve. "Nah, let's rest up and leave tomorrow," Jack replied casually. I was worried about staying in the hotel arranged by the organizers in case they retaliate at midnight, but Jack assured me, "Don't worry, no one in this city will dare touch us." Now, as we walked out of the alley, the city unfolded before us. A road sloped upwards with cars moving like schools of glowing fish in the night river. At the drugstore by the slope, Jack bought iodine and insisted on disinfecting my wound. I teased him about the consequences of standing up to the tattooed guys, but Jack remained unperturbed. The city was a mix of distant green mountains and bustling urban life. "I really like it here," I said, enjoying the scenery, food, and wild fun. Jack teased me about enjoying the bright side of life, which always seems to help my wounds heal quickly. Jack had arranged for the tattooed guys to come after receiving my location message. Just in time, as trouble seemed to be brewing with the siblings Mr. William had warned about. Remembering Jack's kick during the rescue operation, I couldn't help but admire him. Jack, perhaps amusingly, credited his inherent charm for his actions. A black car pulled up, and the driver, recognizing Jack, opened the door. "Let's head back to the hotel," Jack said, and as the car ascended the slope, the cityscape receded behind the car window. The night was clear as a train glided past on an elevated track, under the moonlight. I grumbled about my phone being dunked in an ice bucket earlier. Jack offered to buy me a new one, but I insisted on the latest model. After a series of events and a family dinner, Jack's parents approved, except for a tense moment when a fortune teller was mentioned. The atmosphere lightened as we all understood the unspoken agreement. Calvin's sudden disappearance was still a mystery, but Jack's family found a lead. Despite disowning Calvin, they tactfully set up Calvin's belongings in Jack's room. I continued to message Calvin, desperate for a reply. Susan planned to travel and hosted a farewell gathering at her store with Susan teasing about her new phone. She joked about being a rich second generation on my behalf. The bustling ancient city showed no signs of slowing down, even with Susan taking a break. As Susan prepared to leave, we toasted to her journey, and I couldn't help but admire her freedom. Susan cheekily toasted to taking my future wealth in exchange for shouldering the burden of being a rich heir. The city continued to buzz with activity day and night, with tourists flocking the streets despite Susan's store closure. As I was escorted home by Nick after another outing with Susan, he prepared a warm lemon honey drink for me while he took a work call on the balcony. The call seemed to be about the launch plan for a local skincare brand they acquired recently. With the rise of Chinese brands, they aimed to revitalize the brand and relaunch it to leverage the current market trends. This job was originally Calvin's responsibility, now it naturally falls to Jack. So tough, I thought to myself as I sipped on lemon water. But as I was lost in my thoughts, suddenly everything went dark. Power outage? The property management quickly informed us in the owners group that there was a sudden line fault in the neighborhood, and it was being repaired. However, even after Jack's meeting-like phone call, the issue was still unresolved. Now you've got two options, either take the stairs down from the 18th floor or wait for the power to come back on. Leaning against the glass railing, I teased Jack with a smirk. It seemed like we had a choice, but in reality, there was only one. Mind if I smoke here? Go ahead. I once told Susan how much I liked an actor because in a certain movie, he looked so intriguing in a black shirt while smoking. What I didn't say out loud was that the side profile of that actor smoking looked a lot like Jack. From bottom to top, the slightly open collar, the prominent Adam's apple, the sharp jawline, and I couldn't help but swallow hard at this moment. A thin veil of mist spread in the night sky, quietly lingering. The male fairy stood majestically under the mist, silently enchanting souls. I could hear my own heartbeat, thumping in my chest. It was purely lustful. What's wrong? Jack asked while biting on his cigarette, looking straight at me. Our eyes met, and sparks flew in my mind, one outrageous thought after another popping up. I hesitated for a few seconds, my gaze falling on his slightly parted lips, and softly asked, "Can I have one?" Without waiting for a response, I reached out with my right hand and took the half-smoked cigarette, placing it between my lips. The smoke wafted like a thin veil covering my eyes, and the wind brushing my face felt even more intense than Susan's wine. I felt a bit dizzy. Do you like it? Before I could react, Jack's face was inches away from mine. His long eyelashes slightly flickering, delicately brushing against my heart. Want to try something else? As he took the cigarette back, his fingertips lightly grazed my lips. Then, he held my chin. His breath was getting closer, and I obediently closed my eyes, even starting to anticipate Jack's whiskers softly brushing against me. And then, intelligence sweeping activated. The bright lights in the room, like crashing waves, quickly extinguished the budding intimacy. The appliances, newly powered up, started buzzing back to life, completely disregarding the human drama. What's more, beyond Jack's shoulder, I noticed a Scarlet eyes watching from high up. Scarlet. The cat meowed as it jumped down from the flower shelf, swishing its tail into the living room. Looking out from the 18th floor, the whole neighborhood was brightly lit again. The line issue had been fixed. Both of us looked at each other awkwardly about the other accident. Judy, I think you still have a lot of things to take care of. I walked into the living room, muttering to myself, not giving Jack a chance to interrupt. I am really sorry, but could you please give me a ride? I didn't drink much today. Well, maybe I did, feeling a bit lightheaded now. By the time I finishing saying this, I was already standing politely by the door. Jack walked leisurely toward me, stood in front of me, then suddenly bent down, carefully scrutinizing my face. Have you had too much to drink? He was silent, but his eyes moved towards my lips. I held my breath, tensed up, my hands behind my back twisting into a bunch of yarn. Is something wrong? Jack straightened up, eyebrows slightly raised. Nothing, I must have mistaken. After the door closed, I let out a sigh of relief, but just as I turned around, I saw Scarlet peeking out from behind the flower pot. What are you looking at? I scooped her up. You did not see anything. Susan asked me as soon as she got off the plane, if I slept with Jack last night. It's such a great opportunity, why are you hesitating? She sighed on the phone. Judy, you've got issues, you need to deal with it. I lowered my voice, glancing towards the conference room behind the glass doors. Jack had already taken his seat, his secretary handing him some documents, reporting briefly. "We'll talk later." After sitting down, Jack looked up from a pile of files, but didn't meet my eyes. "All right, everyone, it's about time, let's get started." Today was my first day on rotation in the strategic development department of my family's company, due to a cooperative project with Jack's company, surprisingly being in the same meeting. Returning home after studying abroad, rotating through various important departments in a company to accumulate experience, and then gradually being promoted, is the ideal model for grooming children to take over the family business. I was walking the same path that Jack had once walked. Of course, he navigated it far smoother than me, or any of our peers in the industry. The meeting lasted quite long, from 2 in the afternoon until dusk. During that time, my brain had to work at full speed to handle various data, analysis reports from the business departments, and Jack's occasional inquiry on my opinions. The almost 2 years of rigorous rotational training program indeed accelerated my growth. I consistently presented my views and engaged in discussions with Jack on several important aspects. If my dad saw this scene, he'd probably open a bottle of champagne to celebrate tonight. Getting into the groove, I silently praised myself. "Great job, Judy, you're turning into a mature professional woman, balancing work and personal life, even if you almost kissed this man last night. Now, wait a minute, why am I thinking about that?" It was too late, and I subconsciously shifted my gaze to the opposite end of the long table, where Jack was attentively listening to the market department director's report. He was wearing a similar shirt as last night, sleeves rolled up, revealing a toned forearm. Between his slender fingers was a black pen, absent-mindedly tapping on the notepad. When he heard a key piece of information, he lifted his hand to his chin, and his index finger lightly brushed his lower lip. It instantly brought back memories of him touching my lips from last night, magnified in my mind. The overwhelming sense of shame made me instinctively straighten my legs, but my footing wasn't stable, and I slipped, my high heel directly kicking the market department director opposite. Meth director winced in pain. All eyes turned to look at us. Sorry, I didn't realize your legs were that long, got you with just one kick." "It's a work injury, Judy, the head of department. We'll treat you guys from the marketing department to coffee," the director said. Jack continued studying the documents in his hand as if nothing had happened. I turned my head angrily, forcing down the corners of my mouth. As a business partner, Jack politely escorted me and my colleagues downstairs after the meeting. Knowing the unspoken understanding between us, everyone hurriedly entered the employee elevator, leaving me to ride the group's exclusive elevator with Jack. My dad said to invite you to my house for tea when you're free." I awkwardly initiated a conversation. "Sure. Thank your uncle for me," Jack replied casually. Leaning against the elevator, one hand in his pocket and the other typing on his phone, he added, "But I'm busy tonight, how about another day?" "Socializing?" He turned to look at me, a hint of mischief in his eyes. "If I drink too much, will you come pick me up? Don't you have a driver?" "He took a day off," I replied. Ding! The elevator reached the first floor. "I was just kidding," Jack smirked triumphantly. "Go home early, looks like it's going to rain tonight." With that, he walked out briskly. I followed behind, overhearing his intimate tone during the phone call. "Not late, perfect timing, I just finished work too." I clearly understood who Jack was in a hurry to meet. The next day, not just me, but everyone saw them as trending on the entertainment news. Popular actress Anna arrived in the city, attending a friend's gathering despite the rain, rumored to have a close relationship with Jack. Heir of Green's group. It was reported that the two were alumni of Columbia University. Gossip news naturally came with blurry paparazzi photos. The first one showed 5 or 6 people walking together under umbrellas on a dimly lit street in the rain. In the middle, 2 people stood under one umbrella, their faces obscured by it. All that was distinguishable was a figure in a flowing long skirt and another in a shirt and pants, both tall and elegant. The second photo was clearer. It captured them standing under a private club's veranda in a deep alley, with waiters taking their umbrellas. The man and woman under the shared umbrella were finally revealed. Susan texted first, "Is it true? Is Jack involved with that woman?" Eric called next. Judy, stay calm. Things may not be as the media portrays. Even Henry sent a message of comfort. Judy, I don't work night shifts this week. Feel free to hang out and call me anytime. After reading the messages calmly, I looked up and addressed all the curious yet evasive eyes in the meeting room. That's it for today's department meeting. Everyone can go back to work. Thank you for your hard work. At the dinner table, my parents absent-mindedly picked at their food, exchanging knowing glances. Judy, about the news, Jack's father explained to me, cautiously began my dad. The Greens acquired a skincare company last year, and Anna is their brand ambassador. That's the situation. Yes, because Jack and Anna knew each other in college. So it made sense to have her as the ambassador, more cost-effective than hiring other influencers. That's why they picked her. My mom added. After slowly finishing my food, I nodded and said, I already know. Did Jack tell you? They both visibly relaxed. I knew it. He's reliable, after all. I've known him since he was little. I interrupted. The truth of this scandal doesn't matter as long as it doesn't affect the core interests of our family. Who cares who he's dating outside? Didn't you both educate me and my brother like this before? Did you forget? After listening, they exchanged looks before muttering, you're right if you can think like this. And with that, the issue was settled. Firstly, it's about a domestic brand striving to stand out among foreign competitors and a Chinese female star working hard to establish herself in the European and American markets. Anna fits the brand image perfectly. Secondly, her own influence and the reasonable endorsement fee can save the company a lot in marketing expenses, which can be directed towards research and development, a strategic move beneficial for the brand's long-term growth. Lastly, getting caught by paparazzi isn't all bad, free publicity. But Jack only responded to my last sentence. The trending news is dying down. Tonight the corporation and Anna's studio will issue a joint statement clarifying that our relationship is purely professional. That's too clear-cut. What about your friendship? Standing by the office window, watching the bustling street below, I smiled lightly. Don't be so serious. Remember our agreement not to interfere in each other's private lives. It applies to you too. There was a long silence on the phone before a reply came. Almost forgot. You're generous. With that, the call ended. I remembered Anna. It was May that year, with the colorful blossoms of Columbia University almost drowning in a sea of blue-robed graduates. Among the jubilant blue-robed graduates was our role model since childhood, Jack. Unfortunately, a week before the graduation ceremony, his mother had just undergone emergency surgery and needed to recuperate. Unable to leave his wife alone in their home country, his father entrusted me and Calvin, who were studying in California at the time, to be Jack's companions. Despite nearing exam week, Calvin and I rushed from California to New York, each with a tired, sleepless face, amidst the vibrant crowd, squeezing through the gates of this world-renowned institution. The sky-blue graduation gown looked particularly good on Jack, but then again, I believe Jack looked good in anything. When his name was called, and he walked up to shake hands with the dean, Calvin and I cheered and took pictures excitedly from the audience. Suddenly, someone tapped my shoulder. I turned around and met a charming and delightful smile. Hey, what's your name? Anna is undeniably beautiful, but in the bustling city of New York filled with beauties, her beauty is just like a common spring color among the numerous gorgeous women. What truly captivated me were her eyes that held stories and a hint of wild vitality behind the brightness. Once you've seen her, you'll understand. Anna, it's your turn. Jack, who was coming off the stage, stood between me and her. When they call Anna on stage later, remember to help your sister take some photos, okay? She playfully winked at me. I couldn't take my eyes off her, experiencing what it felt like to be enchanted by beauty. But when Anna gracefully walked up the stage, Jack unceremoniously blocked my camera. Step aside, I'll take the photos. Calvin and I were stunned, watched as Jack expressionlessly raised his phone, took a few shots of Anna on stage. This guy's got some issues. The strangeness continued. After the ceremony, Jack declined his classmates' invitations and grabbed both me and Calvin, heading towards the campus gates. What's the hurry, Jack? We still wanted to look around. Calvin protested on the right side. What's there to see? Been here before. Jack, that pretty sister is also out there. I saw Anna and waved quickly. He pulled us along even faster. I'm not going, I don't know her. That evening, under Jack's inexplicable coercion and temptation, Calvin and I changed our flight tickets and were hurried onto the plane. So, happy graduation? The two of us stood at the airport entrance, looking utterly puzzled. Have a safe trip. Jack stood guard, watching us go in, as if he had just let out a breath. While waiting for the flight, Calvin finally hesitated and spoke up. Heard that Anna has a sugar daddy outside the school. I swallowed the cola I had just sipped, suddenly feeling a bitter taste as the bubbles exploded in my mouth. But then I thought of Susan, wearing nothing expensive from head to toe. For her, the only luxury item was probably the blue robe worth $50,000 per semester. No wonder. Lost in thought, your family would never approve of her being with Jack. Huh? Isn't your brother acting weird today? Taking photos voluntarily and yet not daring to get too close. Calvin scratched his head in confusion. Yeah, is that so? You really are clueless. I patted him on the shoulder. Calvin, if our families ever arranged a marriage for us, we should stick together. Why? We pretend to be married on the surface, but privately, we don't interfere with each other. If one day either of us finds true love, we must support each other for the sake of our happiness, understand? Makes sense. Doesn't it? But it's hard not to suspect if you have inappropriate thoughts about me. You idiot. Boarding time, get moving. Years later, at the brand launch event organized by Green's Group, I finally saw Anna again. Dressed in an exquisite gown, standing under the spotlight, she smiled with her eyes scanning the audience, not lingering on me. I remembered her, but she must have forgotten me. Jack, who was on the same stage, exuded elegance that was hard to ignore, stealing half the attention from the radiant female star. They stood in the center of the platform, facing the flashing cameras of the media, like a pair of main characters stepping out of a novel. I quietly retreated to the back of the crowd, listening to the whispers along the way. Anna is so beautiful, and she and Jack make such a perfect match. Is that clarification statement true? Why do I doubt it? Even if it's not believable, Jack is ambitious and won't let love get in his way. Marrying Judy is his top priority. Men focused on their careers can be really pragmatic. Excuse me. I politely cut through the gossip and took a glass of champagne from the waiter's tray. Took a sip, the acid hit my teeth. Applause erupted inside the venue. After the interviews, Jack gallantly escorted Anna off the stage. Instead of heading to the banquet area, the two of them left the venue directly, leaving a lot of curious gazes behind. Others chatted and caught up with me. Heard that you and Jack are engaged. Congratulations, childhood sweethearts becoming a couple, must be blissfully happy. I finished the remaining champagne in my glass, the sour alcohol tumultuous in my mouth, while I tried to maintain a polite smile on my face. He will be my best partner. Even in a floor-length dress, Anna could still walk in 12 centimeters high heels with wind beneath her feet. She walked alongside Jack. Jack is in a hurry to get me to leave. What is he afraid of? Are you worried you won't make it to the plane on time, and it will reflect poorly on you for the group project? Jack is overly concerned. I've only heard of flights being delayed, not taking off early. Anna retorted without hesitation, even if I'm rushing, I still have time to catch up with Judy. This is strange, you two hardly have a relationship, so why are you fixated on my fiancé? Anna laughed heartily, because seeing you act so guarded is quite entertaining. What's wrong? Scared I'll steal her and say it straight. Jack forced a casual smile and turned to the secretary behind him. Is the driver ready? Hurry him up, Jack, you're really no fun. The big star rolled her eyes, cleverly suggesting that you should have kept me around for a bit longer. Jealousy is the perfect card to play, whether it's a man or a woman, understand? Noted. As they talked, the black business car was already in front of us. Jack raised his hand, symbolically gesturing a protective move towards the woman. But I didn't approve of this behavior. Anna smiled again, this time with approving eyes. Well then, early congratulations to the newlyweds. Thank you, and have a smooth journey. The plane had crosswinds for takeoff and landing. Say that again. Jack personally closed the door of the business car. Unexpectedly, Anna only made a single appearance at the event before leaving hastily. Jack returned to the banquet alone, circulating among the crowd with a glass in hand. Yes, Anna has other appointments, but we have signed a 3-year cooperation agreement. If you want to meet her, there will be more opportunities in the future. Allow me to introduce you, this is my fiancée Judy, please take care of them. I never thought that I would go from being a supporting role to the main character tonight, standing by Jack's side and listening to him introduce me in a whole new light. Everyone congratulated us on the upcoming good news. They were warm, joyful, sincere, even those who were lamenting why it wasn't Anna standing by Jack in pairs just a while ago. I responded politely and thanked everyone, making sure my smile was flawless just like Jack's. As the banquet went on, I drank a bit too much and decided to step outside to sober up. Can you handle it? Jack diverted his attention from the gathering and looked at me. I nodded, gently brushing off his hand. Facing the night breeze, I lit cigarette after cigarette. Under the influence of alcohol and nicotine, I felt torn between two completely different emotions. Anna's enormous endorsement advertisement stood ahead, with a myriad of minty cigarette smoke between us. I remembered her vibrant presence in a graduation gown that year, her trending image standing under Jack's umbrella, and that day on the rooftop garden when I casually asked him if there was anyone else in his heart. Judy. I turned around, and Jack was right behind me, with a gleam in his eyes. Are you sober now? Get up, I'll drive you home. The driver asked where we were going tonight, and the reply was, to the beach. So, the car left the hotel, heading east. The east of the city faced the sea. Halfway up the mountain, a highly private wealthy area was built. Jack seemed exhausted, and after getting into the car, he said, "Let me lean on you for a while," and fell asleep on my shoulder. Half an hour later, the car turned onto a mountain road. The grand gates of the community slowly opened, revealing a series of seaside mansions that looked like magnificent palaces of gold and jade. His mansion started to light up floor by floor. He stood in the vast garden, sober now, looking at me with clarity, eyes shining like the moon reflected in water. Judy, can we talk? I turned to the driver and said, you don't need to wait for me. Then I walked up the steps and went straight into the night, into his realm. On the second floor of the villa, there was a huge terrace overlooking the boundless ocean. I felt the sea breeze as I took the lemon water Jack handed me. Many people asked about our wedding date today, and I thought, why not take advantage of this downtime in our big project and set the wedding date as soon as possible? He sat next to me and asked, no hurry, let's wait a bit. Wait for what? I stared into the cup, at the lemon slice wedged between ice cubes. Wait and see if we really need to get married. After a moment of silence, Jack spoke calmly as always. What's wrong, Judy? I shook my head. Have I done something wrong? No, you're fine. I said, actually, with your abilities, there's no need for you to trap yourself in a marriage. Once the topic that's usually avoided is opened, it's like a dam bursting, and the long-suppressed emotions erupt like a flood, washing away the last shreds of reason. I couldn't control my excitement. Jack, are you crazy? Is marriage a project to you? Just because it was passed on to you? You're really good at taking the larger picture. You clearly have someone you like in your heart, so why marry me? Can't you pursue her? Can't you resist your family? Can't you refuse like you did with all those other blind dates before? Even if I'm with Calvin, if he finds true love, I could set off fireworks for him day and night. But now you want me to see you being tied to me like a contractual husband, day by day, more disturbed than if you killed mice. It meaningful? Even without the relationship by marriage, the friendship between our families and the Greens won't end. At least in my heart, I will always see you as a respected older brother. So, feel free to go find the person you like. Tears welled up as I finished my last sentence. I couldn't explain why I was crying because my mind was a mess, and I just felt more choked up after letting it all out. A tissue was handed to me, and as I sniffled and took it, I couldn't bring myself to look into those eyes. But he crouched down, his eyes level with mine. Look at me, Judy. I kept my eyes down. Everything you said earlier, is it true? I nodded. You really don't want to marry me? I nodded. Forever see me as a brother, right? I timidly raised my eyes and found Jack's face devoid of anger. He was even smiling. Your suggestion is right, I should indeed go find the person I like. As he said this, he deftly loosened his tie, a sense of liberation as he undid the knot. Since that's the case, can I at least give you one last hug? My head was spinning, but I obediently leaned forward and nestled into his embrace. Jack didn't like using cologne, and his clothes always had the faint scent of minty laundry detergent. Resting against his shoulder, I felt the firm chest beneath the shirt, and within that chest, a strong heartbeat. This hug was probably the last time he opened up to me. With that thought in mind, sorrow overwhelmed me once again. But before the tears could fill my eyes, I suddenly realized something was wrong. Jack had used his loosened tie to bind my hands. What are you doing? I exclaimed in shock. Judy, do you know that when you lie, you unconsciously bite your lower lip? Want me to get you a mirror? Right now, there's a row of teeth marks on your lower lip. Jack's tone finally broke from its usual calm demeanor. He was impatient, revengeful, as he tightly knotted the tie and then hoisted me over his shoulder with force. I screamed, Jack, let me go. Where are you taking me? Since you're not willing to tell the truth, we'll have a chat in a different place. The spacious and soft bed, thrown onto it, felt like sinking into a swamp of clouds. Soft, yet filled with danger. My hands were tied behind my back, feeling like a lamb waiting to be slaughtered. Jack picked me up from behind, pressing my back tightly against his hot chest. I couldn't see his expression, but I felt his index finger lightly touch my lips, while his right hand caressed my face, wiping away the tears on my cheek. Now, brother is going to ask a few questions. If the answer is yes, bite my finger. If the answer is no, shake your head, okay? He lifted my chin with his right hand. Do you like me? I closed my eyes and bit down hard with my teeth. Jack made a subtle sound as if he was enjoying the pain. Well done, next question. His hand moved down my neck and stopped at my collarbone. Are you still afraid of me? I bit down once again, even harder than before. Jack sighed and leaned his head on my shoulder. Judy, I originally planned to take things slow with you, but now, I changed my mind. He loosened his grasp around my waist, untying the straps of my gown. Continuing on. His breath tickled my ear, causing a shiver down my spine. That night, if we weren't interrupted, we would have kissed, right? I suddenly opened my eyes and struggled to sit up. Has Jack been possessed by a male fox spirit tonight, asking questions that are getting more and more embarrassing? Don't move. He tightened his grip, holding me firmly in his arms. If you don't shake your head, I'll take it as a yes. With that, he leaned in and found my lips. The aggressive kiss ended, and I could barely support myself without leaning against his arm. The air simmered in silence, only the close breaths of two people and the distant sound of the waves outside could be heard. In the dimly lit bedroom, moonlight spilled on the floor. One last question. Jack's voice grew huskier. Do you know how long I've been waiting for this day? He reached under the pillow and pulled out a dark red, soft lace blindfold. Then, calmly, he covered my eyes. He lifted me up with his strong arms, and Jack's presence completely enveloped me. I'm sorry, Judy. I, as your brother, have never been worthy of your respect. When I opened my eyes, the sunset had dyed the whole sky. After a moment, I realized it wasn't a sunset, but the seaside, bathed in the early morning light. Following the awakening was the sore softness of my body, especially the stiffness in my waist and legs. I sneakily pulled back the covers to glance, feeling ashamed and wanting to bury myself with a pillow. What are you doing? A man's large hand reached over, pulled me into his arms, his tone lazy yet satisfied, full of vitality. I was startled and covered my face with the blanket, hearing the person behind me chuckle. The corner of the blanket was pulled down, revealing the peaceful and warm morning by the sea. Jack's fingers gently brushed through my hair, saying, "Good morning, Judy." The white gauze curtains rustled in the morning breeze, and the sea shimmered with tiny specks of light. I gently held his hand, our fingers intertwining effortlessly. "Good morning, Jack," I replied. Recently, the actress Anna, filming a movie in a certain country, was interviewed by a local radio station, openly admitting for the first time that she had engaged in inappropriate relationships with wealthy men during her university days, revealing details about her personal orientation. To be honest, I don't regret it because it was the only way I could continue my studies at Columbia at the time, but I don't recommend young people to do the same. I paid a great price to get out of that unhealthy relationship. Back then, I was quite rebellious. I liked a girl at the school and tried hard to pursue her, thinking I was close to success. But one day, she got drunk, hugged me, and cried out the name of another boy in our year. When she saw that boy, she straightened herself up. Although that boy rejected her, I held a grudge for a long time and even deliberately flirted with a few girls who were chasing after him, and some really ended up with me. This incident left a deep shadow on him. Even now, he is vigilant and won't let me get close to his fiancée. Anyway, congratulations to him for achieving his dream, and I wish him a happy marriage. It turns out that once the switch of desire is turned on, it's hard to control. I noticed an increase in the number of times I encountered Jack at work, from big meetings to small gatherings. Wherever he could find an opportunity to approach, he would go afterwards, in the private office, lounge, and sometimes even in the stairwell of the venue. I was anxiously cornered by him. "Jack, what do you want?" "If you want a kiss, it can be just one." One after another. Days passed by, the long rainy season just ended, and the sunlight mercilessly started to scorch. Summer began. On a sweltering weekend, I lay on Jack's lap eating popsicles, Scarlett rested on my stomach licking the fur on her paw, and Jack reviewed corporate briefings on his pad. "Take her away, it's too hot," I lazily said. Jack kept his eyes fixed on the screen, extending his hand to pick up Scarlett. "Come to Daddy." As the heat swept over, the whole city wilted under the scorching sun. I stared out the window in a daze, imagining the buildings as candles melting under the sun. Suddenly, a black shadow fell from the window. It was a large black cicada, belly up, already dead on the balcony. I wondered how the cicada got up here when the sound of a voice call abruptly resounded at that moment. The call was for Jack, and he stared at the screen for 2 seconds before abruptly standing up from the sofa. "Calvin, where are you?" "I'm in the Netherlands, Jack." "You've probably already figured out the situation, right?" Calvin's voice came from the other end of the phone, casual as ever, as if nothing could faze him. "Calvin. You finally show up. Do you know how worried everyone has been?" I shouted at Calvin's avatar on the screen as if he were right in front of me. "Judy!" Calvin exclaimed, "How come you're with my brother? Is there something good about to happen between you two? Congratulations. Don't drag it out." Jack showed his eldest brother authority. "After all this time, it's time to return to the country, right? Whether you're dating a boyfriend or a girlfriend, you have to explain it to our parents in person, but I can't go back to the country right now." "What's wrong?" Calvin said, "There's some trouble and I need you two to come over. Please don't tell anyone, especially our parents." "Are you okay?" Jack and I looked at each other, feeling anxious. "Don't worry," Calvin reassured us, "I follow the local customs and laws as a citizen even when I'm abroad." Calvin brushed it off. "So, it's settled then. Both of you probably have valid Schengen visas, right? I'll buy the plane tickets, but please make sure to come soon. Remember, keep it confidential. Farewell, family, see you in the Netherlands." Alone in the office, Henry was eating the takeout that had just been delivered. His supervisor returned and picked up the thermos on the table, giving him a disapproving look. "You eat so unhealthy all the time, don't we have a canteen in the hospital?" Henry, munching on fried chicken, retorted confidently, "Smoking is unhealthy too, but I don't see you quitting. Are you trying to pick a fight?" The supervisor chuckled, shaking his head. "I mean, Eric always has a smile on his face. With all the senior colleagues here, it's hard not to live a long life." The supervisor scoffed and sighed. "Henry, you're 24 this year, right?" He took out a file from the cabinet and tossed it to Henry. Don't read the diagnosis report yet, look at the enhanced CT images first, let's test your knowledge. Wiping the grease off his hands, Henry placed the images on the lightbox and studied them attentively. There's an abnormal density shadow in the pancreatic head area, can't determine the nature of it. The pancreas seems to be swollen with unclear contours. Could it be pancreatic cancer? The supervisor didn't confirm or deny. Look at another one. Henry furrowed his brows while studying the second image, his tone becoming serious. It has spread to the liver. Well done, Henry, you've made progress. This patient is the same age as you. When faced with this situation, even with the combined efforts of your mentors, there's little hope to save him. So, young man, take care of your health. Henry glanced at the half-eaten fried chicken, losing his appetite. Unless a miracle happens, the patient whose images he saw probably only has a few months left to live. The king of cancer. Henry could almost imagine how life would rapidly wither away under the invasion of disease. All right, tidy up the medical records, accompany me to check on a room, then it's time to go home, the supervisor said. Henry put the images back in the folder and hastily returned it to the cabinet. As he stepped out of the office, he realized he hadn't even seen the name of the unfortunate patient whose images he examined. What if he knew the person? That would be even more heartbreaking. He shook his head, trying to put on the facade of a mature doctor who remains indifferent to life and death, then quickly followed his supervisor's steps. The medical records in the cabinet were neatly arranged in rows. The one that had been taken out and returned had a slightly angled corner, revealing the information on the label. Patient's name, Calvin. Age, 24 years old. Diagnosis, late-stage pancreatic cancer. Arriving in Amsterdam on an early morning, still in the summer, the wind there made you shiver. The temperature had dropped significantly due to the rain in the past few days. The guy who called himself Nick handed me a coat and said, "Put it on." As we left the airport, the sky was overcast. Jack and I sat in the back seat of the car, neither of us uttering a word. Nick was driving, revealing a tattoo on his wrist when he turned the steering wheel, with a ring on his left ring finger. He was a sturdy guy, with a buzz cut, tan skin, and a slightly faded scar on his brow. In the silent car, only the sound of the navigation persistently filled the air. Sorry. I softly responded, feeling the tension building up since I saw Nick looking weary in the airport lobby. After he mentioned that Calvin wanted to explain everything in person, we followed him onto the car. Nick was quiet, immersed in a certain kind of powerless fatigue. People who have happy lives shouldn't display such a state. The European urban colors outside the car window looked dull under the gloomy sky, as if a layer of ash had covered them. Cumulus clouds hung over the spires of churches, with pigeons hovering low around the square. Having traveled this far, it seemed like we were getting closer and closer to a truth we were reluctant to face. "Hey, family, miss me?" Nick teased as we entered. "Stop standing around, sit down. Wait, you don't recognize me?" A figure on the hospital bed looked frail, trying hard to muster some vitality upon seeing us. Calvin, who had disappeared for over 3 months, was now so emaciated, mere bones covered by sallow skin. He wore a knit cap on his head, devoid of any color except in his voice, making it almost unrecognizable. Nick brought 2 chairs and sat by the bedside, holding Calvin's hand. "Let me introduce, Nick, my husband, legally wedded husband. We've discussed your affairs with Nick several times, he's well aware," Calvin grinned, revealing his still pearly teeth. "When I'm no longer here, if he ever runs into trouble, I'll ask you two to take care of him." "What do you mean no longer here?" Jack, who had been silent for too long, finally spoke up. "Where are the medical records? The treatment history? Which doctors have you seen? Which hospitals have you visited? If Western medicine doesn't work, there's still traditional Chinese medicine. If doctors can't help, find the top specialists. I'll contact them now, Jack," Calvin said, paused, and continued, "I'm sorry." Jack suddenly turned away, covering his face and crouching down. When life and death suddenly loom without warning, even the strongest of individuals cannot help but feel overwhelmed. "So, it has to be in the Netherlands," I trembled, whispering, I support legalizing same-sex marriage, but I also support euthanasia. With tears in my eyes, I vaguely saw Jack open his arms, and I stumbled over, embracing his frail and heart-wrenching figure. Bingo, Judy, Calvin's voice floated by. Come on, you steal the lines again, what am I supposed to say? Calvin, trust me, Jack pressed his brother's face into his chest, fighting back tears. I will contact the best doctors, no matter what it takes, but please don't give up now. Jack reached out, wiping away his tears. I believe in you, but I just can't go on, Calvin confessed. Do you know, the progression of this disease is so rapid, it had already metastasized when it was diagnosed, without even a chance for remedies. At first, I was completely scared. For several nights, the pain was so intense that I couldn't even fall asleep. I just sat on the bed, watching the sky gradually brighten and then darken, wondering how many sunrises and sunsets I had left. He went to the hospital to discuss chemotherapy options and asked the doctor if chemo would really work for his condition. The doctor said, "We can only try." Calvin laughed bitterly. Before that, he wandered alone in the ward and saw an old man begging his son to give up treatment, and heard a woman crying because her husband had a stroke due to chemotherapy side effects. The intensive care unit beds sometimes seemed no different from graves. So, should we continue treatment? Some people are firm, some are wavering. The most bewildered are the unfortunate patients. Should we treat them? He heard a painful moan coming from a hospital bed and asked, "Do you need me to call the doctor for you?" The person with lifeless eyes opened a crack and said weakly, "A doctor? Forget it, do me a favor, give me a knife." Of course, there were also positive and optimistic people in the ward. But Jack knew he didn't belong to that group. The increasingly intense pain was eroding his will every minute. It seemed like fate when someone climbed to the rooftop of the hospital and jumped off. Screams echoed, and the doctors drew the curtains in the consultation room. "Does this happen often?" he asked. "Actually, it's relatively rare in the hospital," the doctor replied. "We usually have protective measures." Calvin looked at the blinds blocking the view and asked, "How do you evaluate them?" The doctor raised his head, and a profound gaze shone through the lenses. "After many years of being a doctor, I know we can't judge how a person chooses their own ending." Calvin nodded, "Thank you. I need to reconsider the treatment. This is the ending I chose for myself, to die with dignity while still conscious." After saying these words, Calvin weakened and fell into Nick's arms. A wordless silence weighed on everyone like a huge stone. Trying to calm their emotions, Jack looked at his brother and asked, "So, when?" "Tomorrow, early morning." Calvin smiled weakly, "Thank goodness you arrived in time." "All right, Judy, have you cried enough? Sit down. I've been reading a book I really like lately, and I want to share a passage with you. The world is becoming more and more beautiful, and I am alone, but content. I ask for nothing, just to be bathed in sunlight. I long to mature, ready to die, ready to be reborn." He closed the book, and just then the hospital room door was knocked. It was the doctor. They needed to confirm my decision again while I was still conscious. With Nick's support, I struggled to sit up and said to them, "From now on, I want to stay with Nick. You guys go rest, and remember to dress nicely tomorrow." In the summer in the Netherlands, the daylight is incredibly long. The sun doesn't set until 10 o'clock at night. Jack and I stood by, gazing at the canal where the sunset was reflected on the water's surface, the lights twinkling on the shore, sinking into a calmness after intense emotions. It was right for him to request confidentiality. Jack spoke up, "Parents shouldn't have to watch their children go." I hugged his arm, letting the evening breeze tug at my thoughts, suddenly feeling the need to divert attention with something light. "Jack." I tugged at his sleeve. "By the way, my cat was called Coco at first. Do you know why I changed her name later?" "Why?" "Because she always made a mess in the house, so I called her Scarlet, a beautiful mess." We both laughed, then hugged each other instinctively. "Thank you." He buried his face in my long hair. The wind whispered, the night fell in an instant, the sunset had moved far away in the myriad lights, waiting for the next sunrise. Calvin has always been a very ceremonial person. He chose to hold his final farewell ceremony in a beautiful secluded cabin with a stunning view on the beach sanctuary. On the way here, I picked a flower of each kind I saw and tied them into a bouquet to hand to Calvin. He happily accepted them, as always, with a playful smile. "Thank you, former fiancé." Nick, dressed in a suit, adjusted Calvin's bow tie and then helped him settle with his head against his shoulder. Their hands clasped together, their wedding rings glistening in the sunlight. The local medical staff approached to ask a few questions, and Calvin nodded, indicating he was ready. Then they handed him a small cup of medication. Calvin took a deep breath, looked around at everyone present. "Sorry, Jack, for burdening you so much again. From now on, Mom and Dad can only rely on you. Judy, keep being happy. Eric, this world is beautiful, so look at it well for me." He raised the cup like a toast. "Well, everyone. I'm ready to embark on a journey." With that, he swallowed the medicine, tossed the empty cup aside. "So bitter." Nick held him, kissing his forehead. "No more bitterness." Calvin smiled, closed his eyes, and gradually fell asleep. When the medical staff approached again to confirm, I stepped out of the cabin step by step. It was a beautiful day today, clear skies, the oasis like a slice of paradise. The sea water was crystal clear, like a vast, boundless gem. White seagulls soared, their cries echoing far, far away. I looked up, the blue sky shaded by the canopy of trees, the gentle sun's rays enveloping everything in the world equally. In Calvin's world, it would, forever, never fall. Nick chartered a yacht, taking Jack and me out of the harbor. He said Calvin had one final wish. With the wind whistling in our ears, the city skyline disappeared behind us, the sea was a maze without walls. When the yacht slowed down, Nick pulled out a bank card from his pocket. "This is all the money Calvin had left after selling his house and car, you take it back." Jack said, "You were his love, so you should hold on to it. What are your plans next?" "I'm going to travel and be a travel photographer. If you need help, feel free to reach out to me." "Thank you, I can take care of myself." The boat came to a halt, swaying with the waves. Nick took out a glass bottle from his backpack, clear with a special waterproof paper inside. It had a message written on it. "Hello, I'm Calvin, 24 years old, traveling. If you happen to find me, please take a photo and send it to the email below. Let my family know where I've been." "That's quite creative," Jack commented. Nick got onto the deck, kissed the bottle, and then threw it far away with all his might. The glass bottle drew a shiny arc in the air before making a splash as it landed in the water. Facing that direction, Nick shouted, "Calvin, have a smooth journey. Goodbye. In this vast world, farewell." After returning home, a real storm hit. The news of Calvin's passing completely shattered his parents. Calvin's mother had a mental breakdown, fiercely pounding and kneeling Jack until she collapsed from exhaustion, waking up speechless and never speaking again. His father locked himself in the study room, smoking all night while reading Calvin's letter. The next day, when someone opened the door, they found him hunched over, aged overnight. Growing up together from childhood, even my parents shed tears for Calvin for several nights. My mom announced that from that day on, she would fast and pray for Calvin for a year. When someone falls, there will always be someone else to keep moving forward. Amid chaos, Jack officially took over his father to become the new head of the Greens Group. Before the grief could dissipate, pressure came from all directions. He had no way out. I immersed myself in work, striving to become strong, hoping that if misfortune ever strikes, I can be a wall to shield my family. I began to understand my dad's words about comrades. When we are together, Jack and I heal each other in our own sanctuary. And when morning comes, we hastily rush to our separate battlefields. Day after day, we face storms together. The summer heat faded away, coloring the street with autumn hues. In the pantry, I overheard a colleague sigh that summer had finally ended, and it dawned on me that the unbearable summer had indeed passed. In November, an appointment letter marked the completion of over 2 years of training for me. Formally entering the company's management team in the chairman's office, my dad pushed the appointment document towards me, saying, "Judy, congratulations." "Thank you, Dad." "Don't thank me, it's the decision of the board." He's been in a good mood lately. He'd pick up a new photo frame from the table and start wiping it. The frame contained a picture of his granddaughter. My brother had a daughter last month, and my dad was ecstatic, wiping the frame hundreds of times every day. As he wiped, he asked, "How's Calvin doing lately? Are his parents getting better?" "It's still the same," I replied. "Uncle can barely walk around, and Aunt still can't talk." My dad sighed, "Now, I only wish you all good health." "All right, get off work early today, let's go home and have dinner." In December, the chilling winter. The third psychiatrist Jack brought in reiterated that treatment was impossible if the patient refused to cooperate. I grabbed Jack's cigarette. "Stop smoking, let's cultivate healthy habits." After a while, he took out a small box from his pocket, suddenly knelt down on one knee. Opening the box, a dazzling engagement ring sparkled. "Marriage is a family matter, but getting married is between you and me. Judy, will you marry me?" I jumped off the couch in shock, then threw myself into his arms. "Yes." I nodded. "Jack, I will." After putting on the ring, he kissed me. That's when I realized tears had already streamed down his face. In February, a long-standing gloom over the greens was finally pierced by a ray of light. Calvin's email received the first reply from a distant place. In the photo, lush green mountains stood above a glassy blue expanse of water. The email contained a sentence, "Welcome to Tahiti." In that instant, the sunlight from the islands in the southeastern Pacific pierced through the winter night of the city. At the sight of the email, Aunt, who had been silent for a long time, finally cried out, holding her phone to her heart, repeatedly calling out, "Calvin." As fireworks filled the sky, time swept everyone forward. Since then, we have received several emails. He encountered boats sailing at night, illuminating the sea with lights used for catching squid, turning the sea into a bright red. He met a group of young people partying on a cruise ship on a sunny day, holding champagne and cake, warmly posing with his bottle doppelganger. He was also pushed onto the deck by giant waves in a stormy night, and the surviving crew members detailed that horrific experience in the emails, expressing gratitude to God through their message. That bottle, circulating the world with ocean currents, forged a subtle yet strong connection between us and the world. Calvin, in his way, taught everyone an important lesson about life. In April, Susan accompanied me to try on wedding dresses. When the salesperson drew back the curtain, she was so excited she almost cried. She turned away, joking, "It's not me marrying you. Judy, choose this one. Let Jack cry." Sitting in the lounge drinking tea, she asked, "How's Calvin's boyfriend these days?" I opened a social platform and navigated to Nick's profile. He had indeed become a travel photographer, exploring far and wide with his camera. From being initially ignored to now having thousands of followers, he was gradually making progress. Everywhere Calvin visited became Nick's next destination. He followed his love's footsteps on Earth in this way. I pointed to a comment and said to Susan, "You got it wrong, he's not Calvin's boyfriend, he's his husband." In the blink of an eye, it was May again, summer approaching. The Greens cheerfully booked an entire island. On the wedding day, guests boarded a ferry to the flower-filled island. After lunch, a group of people surrounded me for hair, makeup, and styling, while also capturing various content for the video shoot. Next, surrounded by bridesmaids, I descended the stairs, lifted my gown, and walked alone towards the outdoor canopy, where a familiar silhouette awaited. When Jack turned around, Susan's prediction came true. His eyes welled up, and he hugged me tightly. Friends' cheers drew closer, the camera capturing it all. The butler reminded us, "It's almost time, please make your way to the wedding venue." Someone suggested, "Let's take a selfie with our phones." The frame filled with smiling faces, and I sent the photo to the group before preparing to hand the phone to a bridesmaid. Suddenly, the phone vibrated, and a new email notification popped up. I quickly opened it. The photo showed a scene I knew well, the festive island, colorful balloons floating above, surrounded by flourishing greenery, mixing roses and guests' elaborate attire. By the rocky shore stood a giant wisteria arch, waiting silently for the newlywed ceremony. Below the photo was a message: even when wandering, every path will take us home. What's wrong, Judy? Don't cry, your makeup will be ruined. Susan hurriedly handed me tissues, gently wiping away my tears. Jack, now holding the phone, choked up for a moment, then took my hand, cheerfully addressing everyone. It's okay, everyone is here, we're ready to begin. Following the soothing melody of a violin, I walked arm in arm with my father down the aisle. Amidst the lively applause and cheers, he handed me over to Jack, wiping away a tear discreetly before turning away. Under a shower of petals, Jack and I, surrounded by blessings, walked towards the end of this sacred journey. At 5 o'clock in the afternoon, the golden twilight unfolded in the sky amidst the radiant sunset. The cascading wisteria vines looked indescribably beautiful. Facing the guests, my gaze moved over the pleased and joyful faces. My parents were beaming. Eric and his wife waved at us, their toddler in a fluffy pink dress seated on his lap, easily resembling his father. Aunt snuggled with Nick, wiping tears while clapping excitedly. There was Hendry, friends, and elders, tears once again blurring their vision. As the officiant gave his speech, I turned to adjust my veiled head, catching sight of a luminous star in the sky at that moment. It seemed not just a star, maybe a seagull soaring in the sunlight, shining bright all over. No, it probably wasn't a star or a seagull, it was just a free spirit between heaven and earth. The MC announced, "The groom may now kiss the bride." Jack lifted my face, gently wiping away the tears from my eyes, then gave me a kiss. Fireworks soared, laughter surrounded us, the waves crashing against the rocks behind the arch blossomed into a huge wave, seemingly leaving a memory of this wedding. As night fell, the island lit up, hosting endless singing and dancing. The tide receded by the beach, revealing rocks and sand. 2 teenagers were clam digging, the younger one carrying a bucket, the older with a flashlight. "Bro, there's a glass bottle." The little boy excitedly picked it up and handed it to his brother. The brother replied nonchalantly, "What's so special about picking up a glass bottle? Put it back. We should head back before Mom finds out." "Bro, will the bottle still be here tomorrow?" "It might stay, or it might drift away with the high tide." "Where do you think it'll go next?" "Following the waves, anywhere, it's possible. All the water in the world will meet again. The Arctic Ocean and the Nile will merge in the moist clouds." This ancient and beautiful metaphor made the moment sacred. Regardless of wandering, every path will indeed lead us back home.